Hi guys, and welcome to today's Engineering Philosophy live stream. Today I'm gonna react to CosmicSkeptic's Can You Answer These Tricky Moral Dilemmas? I must admit, I only watched the video halfway through so far because I found it so interesting that I really wanted to give you my fresh reactions and not have everything thought through ahead of time. Let's go.
Hey guys, it's CosmicSkeptic, and statistically speaking, you're probably not subscribed. So, subscribe. And if you really like my videos, don't forget to hit the notification bell as well, which does what...
By the way, I linked the video below, so check it out. Be sure to like his video, and subscribing to him can't hurt either. And if you want, also subscribe to me, please.
The subscribe button was supposed to do in the first place, which is let you know when I release new videos. But anyway, today I thought we'd try something a little bit different. A friend of mine recently introduced me to a website
called
Philosophy Experiments,
which is a website that has on it a bunch of quizzes and tests and things to do with philosophy.
And one of the quizzes is a quiz on ethics. It essentially puts forward a bunch of quite difficult ethical dilemmas and asks you to say what you think about.
So I thought it might be interesting
to essentially go through the quiz and talk you through my thinking on these particular ethical dilemmas to give you a better idea of how I think about ethics, but also so that you can play along and see what you think about these two.
Now, bear in mind, these ethical dilemmas are supposed to be very difficult. So if you disagree with me, I'd love to know why. If you can let me know in the comments down below. And do bear in mind that I'm doing this off the cuff, so take everything I say with a pinch of salt, but I'll try and be as accurate.
Yeah, same here. I react, I give my comments, but everything's spontaneous, so probably not all answers will be good
and thorough as I possibly can. So the first question is one that I think will be quite familiar to viewers of this channel. You pass someone in the street who is in severe need, and you are able to help them at little cost to yourself. Are you morally obliged to do so?
So, okay, let's go a few seconds back that you see the... I hate YouTube. Yeah, okay. Yeah, there it is. Okay, you pass someone in the street who is in severe need and you're able to help them at little cost to yourself. Are you morally obliged to do so? Now, the answer to this question is very difficult because there's not much info given here. The question is, what is severe need? I mean, severe need can be he's literally bleeding to death right now, or he's in a long-term severe need, like he's addicted to drugs. And the other thing is, what is the little cost? I mean, if somebody is bleeding to death and it's no risk yourself, sure, you're obliged to help. But if it's a homeless person and your little cost help would be to pay one meal for him, the answer is different. So why are you obliged to help in the first place when the person is bleeding to death and you're in no risk of your own life and helping him? The one first is he's really in danger of losing his life, and life well-being is one of the core values, one of the valuable things you have, and he's going to lose that permanently if you don't help. So basically, this is one of the reasons why you're obliged. And also, if the person is really bleeding to death and you're near, you need to help because you don't know if somebody else is going to come and help. And so the first responder is obliged to help. This is like, it is in law. It makes sense. But on the other hand, if the person is homeless and your little cost would just help them to get one meal and you don't significantly change the underlying issue with your money, then in my opinion, you're not obliged to help. Of course, it would still be the nice thing to do to help, but you cannot help every homeless person with the limited amount of money you had. And if you help everybody, then it's not a little cost to you anymore. So basically, it depends a lot on how urgent and severe is it, how much are their rights impacted, and basically how long lasting is the little cost help that you can give. This is what I would say. So depending on the case, you're either strongly obliged if the person is bleeding to death, or basically if the person's just hungry, not even homeless, and you could help them with €1, you're not obliged. It would be maybe nice.
to do so. Now, you might be surprised at how I answer this question. I've spoken a lot about the ethics of charity and the ethics of reducing suffering where we can, especially with relation to veganism. And so you might think that I can quite simply answer this question by saying, yes, if you're in a circumstance where you can help someone who's severely in need at a comparatively low cost to yourself, you should always be obligated to do so. But we must consider the implication of the word obligated or obliged here. To say that you're obliged to do something is to say that it is wrong of you not to do it. In any circumstance like this, where someone's suffering severely and you could...
So here we agree. You're obliged if the person is bleeding to death. If the person is not in such a severe need, if the severe need is more of a long-lasting thing that you cannot really solve long-lastingly at little cost, the situation is different. So you need more information to properly answer this question.
You can help them at little cost to yourself. It is always wrong of you not to do so. Now, you may think this is true. You might think, of course, it would be wrong of me not to help someone in severe need right in front of me at little cost to myself. But we must consider the implications of this. The fact is that since we live in a world that is infused with incalculable amounts of suffering all over the globe, and we also live in a world where it's incredibly easy for us to help these people due to the existence of charities, which now, given the internet, you can donate to these charities simply by logging on your computer, whatever device.
This is a good point. You can give to charities, but almost all the help you give to charities is not very long lasting. So it's usually a drop in the bucket. And the question is always how much of your money goes to the charity and how much gets lost in bureaucracy. And really, how little is the cost if you consider the impact? I mean, basically, if you donate €5 to save a starving child, yeah, you should do that, but there's millions of starving child, so you cannot help them all. And your time and energy is better spent at being politically active or finding other ways to improve the underlying conditions and not just to basically throw away your energy. Basically, what I want to say is it depends how long-lasting the impact of the energy again is. Basically, just because something is at little cost, it still does not mean you should do it, because you have to always weigh, okay, what is the cost and what is the impact? And if basically you have worked an hour of your life to make a child suffer less for 5 minutes, then you might say, it's probably not worth it. And so you always have to compare how long-lasting is the impact you make compared to the cost and how dear the cost is for you. I mean, it makes a difference if you donate €100 is a different story if you're making minimum wage or if you're a billionaire. So context matters a lot here, and I think short-term solutions that don't really improve the situation of a person are seldomly something I would say you're obliged to. This is always nice, but it's not really a long-lasting help. So it's not that of a good investment of your energy or your money. I would always prioritize investing your energy and money in the long-lasting solutions and changing the underlying issues. And it also depends basically what you yourself consider your purpose in life to be, because basically you cannot help everybody, because then it's not at a little cost. Basically, you tear yourself apart. And to help people, you need to be comfortable, healthy, psychologically stable to a certain degree yourself, because otherwise you're just not in a position where you can help. So you're only morally obliged to help if the help is long-lasting enough to warrant the energy and time invested, and you're only morally obliged to help if you're really in a position that it's really at little cost. But basically, that you really have the time and energy to give up without tearing yourself apart and making it a net zero. Basically, if you impact your life so much that it's not good enough, that it's not a good life anymore, just to help one person have a little bit better life, in the end, the net balance is also something that you should consider.
You're currently watching this video on, you could just open a tab, go to a charity like Oxfam, donate some money, and have a very real effect on people whose lives are severely in need of help. But here's the problem. If we say that if you find yourself in a situation where you can help someone who is severely in need at a comparatively lower cost to yourself, it is wrong for you, every time that situation comes about, you are obliged to help them. It is wrong for you not to help them. And we have to consider that there is never a time.
As I said, it is true, but it just depends if that situation is really little cost, because it doesn't matter how little the cost is. You have your overall budget of time and energy that you can spend to help people, and you need to best invest that time and energy. And you're obliged to do that. This is my thing. You have to find your purpose. You have to find the way you want to improve the world, where you can make the biggest impact with what your strengths and weaknesses are, and spend your energy there, and not just meaninglessly spend all your money on some charity that probably wastes 90% on bureaucracy anyway. So not to derogate charities in general, but unfortunately, historic scandals have showed that more charities than I would like to admit have this problem.
Time that you are not in that situation, right? Because of the fact that charities exist and they operate 24/7, you can always be donating money, and the fact that there is an endless supply of suffering people on planet Earth, you are never not in this situation. You are always in the situation where you can help somebody by significantly less cost to yourself by donating some money to these charities. If we say that you're morally obligated in any situation where someone is suffering severely and you can help them at comparatively little cost to yourself to help them, if you say that that is a moral obligation, then that means whenever you find yourself in that circumstance, that's what you have to do. But we're always in that circumstance because we can always help somebody by donating to charity. What that means is that, you shouldn't be watching this video right now.
Yeah, again, this is like, he has a good point, but I think it's not fully thought to the end, because basically, if you give all the time and sum up all these little costs, then it's not little cost anymore overall. And yeah, me making this video, watching his video, makes me think about morality, makes me understand morality better, makes me find better ways to express morality, to help people. So basically, this is not a waste of time. And even if I watch other videos on YouTube that are for my entertainment, they might help me relax and then be able to have more energy and help people more. Just what you have to ask yourself always is, what is my purpose? How am I going to make the world better? And how can I better myself and best invest my time and energy to make the world a better place? And sure, you will have time that you waste and where you're not helping people, but this is just because you're human and you don't have unlimited time to focus on worrying about how to make the world better, because then you'll tear yourself apart, get depression, and not be able to help. So the net balance of your time and energy that you invest, what you need to do is live your life well, so you have as much time, money, energy to invest in making the world better as you can, and then use that as wisely as possible.
You should be opening another tab and donating to charity, and doing that practically all the time, because you're never not in the situation where someone's suffering severely somewhere in the world and you can help them simply by pressing a button and sending them over a bit of money. Now, the problem with saying that this is an obligation that we all have is that it will completely upend the way that we all live our lives. For instance, it becomes obligatory that you never again eat out at a restaurant, or never ever again buy a new book that you don't really need to read. Things like this, because that money that you spent could have gone towards helping somebody who is severely suffering. And so it would be...
Here I would say, yes, if you don't really need to read a book, don't read it. It would be morally wrong to waste your money on a book. The problem is, you don't always know if the book will be of help to make the world better when you read it or not. And if so, basically, if the money is better spent on that book than on giving to a poor person on the side of the street, it's very hard in day-to-day life to make that decision. And basically, if you read that book for your entertainment and that helps you tomorrow be more energized and help more people, that would also be a wise investment. It's just really, really hard to accurately judge, and humans are irrational. You cannot always make that right, so you'll waste money. I've wasted so much money in my life that I regret having spent on useless stuff. But my target is to get better and better and better at it.
Quite a little cost to you, comparatively, to give up that meal or not read that book, if you can buy a malaria net, which may actually save someone's life somewhere else in the world. But because we live in a world where this is always a possibility, there's always more money that could be given, it means that you essentially would commit yourself to selling all of your non-essential possessions. So maybe you'd be allowed to keep your house. You might need to downsize it though, because you don't need that big of a house. You probably wouldn't need to buy a car, because you can probably get by getting the bus or cycling or something like this. You can never really buy books. You can never buy a TV. You've got to cancel your Netflix subscription. You have to get rid of...
Sorry, my cat is meowing in the background if you hear that. She's hungry. And maybe I have to split this into two, because I just see that my secondary screen, which is my iPad, is on 6% battery. Let's see if it makes it through the whole video.
Of everything that is strictly not essential to your life, because somebody else suffering and genuinely severely suffering and possibly on the brink of death, surely that suffering is going to be far more important than the suffering that you'll receive from, not watching Netflix. But I think our intuitions tell us that this isn't a fair thing to ask of somebody. It may be virtuous for somebody to sell all of their
No, I don't agree. I think it's a fair thing to ask of people that want to call themselves a good person to not binge watch Netflix all the time. But it depends on the situation. If you're depressed and you're not really up to anything but binge watching Netflix, and binge watching Netflix for some reason helps you with your depression, go ahead. I don't judge you for it. But if you just binge watch Netflix instead of helping when you're healthy, energetic and stuff, just because you don't have a better idea what to do with the time, I would say that's wrong. You should figure out what your purpose in life is and how you can make the world better.
Essential possessions and give the money to charity. But I don't think it would be fair to say that they're obligated to do so. Right? Clearly, it can't be an obligation in my view, because otherwise there would be no books behind me. I'd have sold them all and given the money to charity. So how do we kind of square these intuitions that we feel? Well, I think this all has to do with the wording of the question. Right? The question asks, you pass someone in the street who is in severe need, and you are able to help them at little cost to yourself. Are you morally obliged to do so? Now, I would say that although we have an obligation to as much as we practically can help those who are suffering at little cost to ourselves, we can't say that in any given situation you will have a moral obligation to help them in that situation. I think we have a moral obligation overall to help a significant number of people in this kind of situation.
Agreed.
You can't say that in every instance of that situation you're morally obliged to help, because if you do, you're led to this conclusion where you can basically never do anything ever again because you're spending your entire life giving money to charity. So we can say that you have a general moral obligation to sufficiently help the suffering, but it doesn't follow that in literally every situation where you...
So I think we agree here. This is why I said the question is just not precise enough, because it depends on what the severity is and how long-lasting the effect of the severity will be and what the little cost is. The analogy with bleeding to death or just homeless, not to dunk on homeless people, but bleeding to death is clearly worse than being homeless and of a more imminent danger.
Have that opportunity, you have to do so. Now, some of you out there might be thinking, well, hold on. If you don't think it's an obligation to, try and prevent this person's suffering in every circumstance, what about the implications for veganism, right? Does that mean that every so often I can have a bit of steak or, have some eggs or something because, I have a general obligation not to cause suffering, but I don't have to do it in every given situation? No, these are different. And the difference here is that in one case, you are committing harm, and in the other case, you're allowing harm to continue or to happen. So when you pass someone in the street and they're severely suffering and you can help them, but you don't, you allow them to suffer. You don't cause them to suffer. Whereas when you buy an animal product, you are literally the reason why animals will be being killed and tortured.
Yeah, I don't fully agree. I mean, yeah, sure. Causing somebody to suffer is clearly worse than not helping somebody who suffers, but overall these situations are comparable. You're, in my opinion, morally obliged to do your best to have let as little people suffer. So if you're a billionaire and you just say, my billions, I don't help anybody, and maybe I even destroy the environment, that's bad. But if you're a person barely scraping by, juggling 3 jobs and 4 kids or something, then you don't really have time and energy to help other people. This is the difference. But so basically, you can always choose not to cause suffering. So you can expect from everybody to not cause unnecessary harm if they just have to not do something like not eat meat, and it doesn't really cost them anything. On the other hand, if you help people, this depends on your overall energy budget, because this is you're actually actively spending a limited resource, while not doing something is an unlimited resource. There's an unlimited number of things that you cannot do.
And harmed, because by paying for this stuff, you're demanding that it continue. It's not the same as allowing these animals to suffer. You're actually causing it. And I think this is a relevant distinction. I do think that in all circumstances where you can avoid causing suffering, you should do so. But I don't think that it's an obligation that in all circumstances where you can prevent someone from suffering, you have an obligation to do so.
Yeah, as I said, almost agreed with him. You always are obliged to not cause unnecessary harm, but you're also obliged to spend as much energy and time and money as you can on making the world a better place, and to try to always to improve yourself, to have more time, energy, etc. to spend, and to be more efficient in making the world a better place.
I think there are some circumstances in which you do have an obligation to prevent someone from suffering, but I just don't think that we can say it as a general rule that any time you find yourself in this situation, you're obligated to help. Sometimes you might be obligated to help, depending on the specifics of the circumstance, but I don't think we can extract from this a general broad principle, as someone like Peter Singer does, that this means that any time we're in that situation, we must be similarly obligated to help, and thereby, because we are always in that situation, given that there are always people suffering who we can always help at considerably less cost to ourselves, we must always do so. I think that.
Yeah, I would say the answer is somewhere in the middle here. You're not obliged to help in every situation, but there's certain situations where you're obliged, like a person bleeding to death, and basically, what we need to define is in what circumstances, especially if it's like life-threatening, long-lasting impact, you are obliged, and under what not. This is situation dependent, of course. He's right, but it's not that you can just generally say it's never a principle that you're obliged to help a person in severe need either.
That would destroy our lives, and I think we would all agree that it would be too much to ask of a person. So with those caveats in place, I think I have to go with not obliged. Question number 2, you have a brother. You know that someone has been seriously injured as a result of criminal activity undertaken by him. You live in a country where the police and legal system are generally trustworthy. Are you morally obliged to inform them about your brother's crime?
That is a really interesting part. So the main question here is if you treat your brother differently than other persons. And there I would clearly say no. So you shouldn't prefer your brother to other persons in that legal sense, although you're clearly closer to your brother emotionally than to other persons. But the question is also, should you turn him over to the police? And there I would again say it's really situation dependent. Our justice system, here it says that the police and legal system are generally trustworthy, but my opinion is our legal system is really not that good. There's a lot that we do wrong in treating criminals, and a lot of better help that you can give the person than turning him in to the judiciary system. So you really have to evaluate here, like, is he a danger to other people? And since he's your brother, you probably have more influence on him than on a random person. So this might be a reason why you are not obliged to report him, because maybe you can prevent him from committing further crimes, which you couldn't do with a stranger. So this is also, again, really difficult evaluations. I would say generally, if he has shot somebody and you're expecting him to shoot somebody again, turn him in. But if you think that if he goes to the criminal system, they will rack him up and he'll be on the criminal path forever. But on the other hand, if you help him become a better person, he will not, then you're not obliged to. So again, situation dependent. And the main difference with your brother part is that you maybe have more influence on him than on other persons. Not that generally you should make a distinction.
My intuition here says yes. Of course, one can psychologically understand why it would be more difficult for someone to turn in their brother or a family member that they care about. But I think the question is getting at this idea that, considering that generally speaking, if we know someone who's committed a serious crime that is worthy of being punished, we should turn them in. Can we allow ourselves to make an exception because if it's our family member, it's so difficult for us to turn them in? No, I don't buy this for a second. I don't think it matters if this person is your brother or your mother or just a stranger on the street. If they've committed a crime that genuinely deserves punishment, then I think you do have a moral obligation to report that. Now, I think, of course, there are exceptions to this for unjust laws. The question makes it very clear. You live in a country where the police and legal system are generally trustworthy, but it doesn't specify that the legal system is kind of accurate.
Yeah, generally agreed. I just would say it's not just unjust laws, it's also about I don't believe in punishment just for punishment's sake. A punishment is there to prevent a person from committing more crimes, doing more harm, and to help them become a better person that not commits harm and creates more value to society. And the question is here, what is right for that person, for your brother? Is it better to have him in the justice system, or can you help them better?
And properly tracks morality. For instance, if in the United Kingdom the police and legal system were generally trustworthy, but they had a terrible law that said that if you read a particular book you should be thrown in jail, then no, I don't think I'd have an obligation to turn that person in. So I think we also have to assume that the laws are just. And I think that in this instance, if somebody's been severely injured as a result of criminal activity, we probably agree that that activity was unjust because it caused this suffering, in which case I think you have as much obligation to turn your brother in as you do a stranger. I think that's what the question's getting at. I think by specifying it's your brother, I think it's trying to get at this idea that is there some difference between turning in a stranger and turning in your brother? And I have to say that no, there isn't, in my view. Question 4, you are able to help some people, but unfortunately you can only do so by harming other people.
Let me read on, because when I let him read finish, he already is moving it out of the screen. So the number of people harmed will always be 10% of those people helped. When considering whether it is morally justified to help, does the actual number of people involved make any difference? For example, does it make a difference if you're helping 10 people by harming one person rather than helping 100,000 people by harming 10,000? No, it does not make a difference if you harm. If we harm 10%, we harm 10%. The question is it morally just to hurt that 10%, no matter if it's 10 or 10,000 people? So that's the real question here. But on that question as it is, I say clearly, no, it does not make a difference.
People. The number of people harmed will always be 10% of those helped. When considering whether it is morally justified to help, does the actual number of people involved make any difference? For example, does it make a difference if you're helping 10 people by harming one person rather than helping 100,000 people by harming 10,000 people? This question is absolutely fascinating. Right? You may have thought, as I thought when I first read this, that the question was about to ask whether it's permissible to harm some people to help a larger number of people. But that's not what it's asking. It's saying, does it make a difference if you're harming one person to save 10 people or harming 10,000 people to save 100,000 people, right? The proportions are the same. You're helping 10 times as many people, but does the actual number of people involved make a difference to how we should morally judge this situation? I think the answer to this question is going to depend on your views about rights. For example, if you're a utilitarian.
So I'm not sure how it depends upon rights, because in utilitarianism, you have basically, you weigh your rights. Usually my criticism of utilitarianism is often that it's not so much focused on rights and other freedoms, but mostly focused on well-being and happiness, maximizing those. But basically, the overall judgment, if the people are all equal, is the same, no matter if you say basically a human life is infinitely valuable or not. The main question is under which circumstances you are allowed to violate rights of people and under which not. And what I didn't catch here from him is how it makes, what difference it makes for his view on the numbers. Basically, if you heard the right of, basically the proportions are the same, so it can't make a difference no matter what logically sound moral system you apply, in my opinion. Prove me wrong in the comments, please, if you have objections to this.
Utilitarian, and utilitarians famously have trouble grounding rights because they only care about the consequence. They have a much less strong view of rights than a deontologist might. A deontologist might say that you have particular rights, like a right to life, a right to liberty, that cannot be infringed upon, right, no matter the circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I said. These cannot be infringed upon. Basically, say it's the right has an unlimited value. The math is still the same. It's just multiplying and or adding infinites, and the math then just becomes really wonky, because whenever you calculate with infinities, the outcomes become very, very non-intuitive, and sometimes, in this case, I would say unintended. But as soon as you know that basically a right has a value, the question is, what is that value? And does the right to life and liberty of each person have exactly the same value?
You have rights that cannot be violated. Whereas a utilitarian might say that what we care about is not the protection of people's rights, but the maximization of pleasure, right? And so if you're a utilitarian, all that really matters is the calculus. It's the calculation of balancing pleasure over pain.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a utilitarian. I find this calculation stupid because there's just much more of moral value than just happiness and well-being. But yeah, at the end, it's always a calculus. And if you're saying that a right is uninfringible, so basically it has unlimited value, you're also doing a calculation. You're just trying to avoid it and copying out of the question.
And so if both situations in terms of their calculation are the same, it's like you harm 10% of the people to help 90% of the people. I don't think it matters how much you scale this up or down. The utilitarian, they run the calculation, they find out that the proportion is going to be the same, the proportion of people helped to harm. And because it's just about the consequence, for the utilitarian, I don't think it would make a difference. If you harm one person to save 10 people, you're equally justified to harm 10,000 people to save 100,000 people. It's the same thing. But if you believe that there do exist such things as rights, I think this complicates matters. Because a right, by definition, in my view, is inviolable.
No. As I said, I mean, you can say that the right has an unlimited value, but rights are not inviolable. Basically, a right is always something that you can lose, because basically every right also must have a duty. Basically, if you want other people to respect your right to life, you must respect other people's right to life, which is why it's okay to shoot somebody who is out there with a gun, hunting people down and shooting innocent people. Basically, he has given up his right because he violates the right to life of other people, and thus he gives up his right, or at least in this moment, basically you're saying, okay, this person is actively choosing to take away the right of other people to live. So if I have to take away his right to live in order to stop him from that, that's justified, because basically you can, even if you give unlimited value to that life, basically that person has unlimited value to life, he has unlimited value to the life, but he is violating this. So he has also an unlimited depth to his life, which makes it is the value of his life zero, basically. I mean, it's not that easy, especially if you calculate with infinities, but I think the concept is clear.
A right to something means that it cannot be taken away from you. It means that that thing is yours and nobody can infringe upon it.
But you may lose the right if you don't fulfill your duties.
Nobody can violate it. That's what a right is. Now, rights always have correlative duties. If one person has a right to something, it means that other people have a duty to respect that right.
Yeah. I wanted to say I agree. I don't. Yeah, sure. If you have a right to life, other people have the duty to not violate your right to life, but vice versa. You have a duty to not violate their right to life, and the argument can be made that if you don't fulfill that duty, you lose your right. So this is what I would argue. I mean, it's more complicated than that, obviously, but that's the thinking that I would apply.
If I have a right to life, it means other people have a duty not to kill me. What this means is that if I have a right, for instance, to not be harmed without my consent, then if somebody else does harm me without my consent, they're failing to discharge a duty. They're violating my right, and they're violating their own duties. If you think that rights are genuinely inviolable in this way, then what that means is it doesn't matter how many people you're saving. You cannot harm somebody without their consent. If they genuinely have a right not to be harmed in such a manner, there's no consequence that could possibly justify violating that right.
Here I would say the value of this life is, I would put the right to life of these people really, really, really high. And since they, in this example, don't violate the rights to life of other people or infringe on their core human rights in any other way, you have to have a really high justification to take away their life to save others. But it's like, basically, this is like the trolley problem. If if you do nothing and one person dies, or if you do nothing and five persons die, and if you do something and just one person dies, I would say you're morally obliged to sacrifice the one person for the five, because just no matter how you view it, 5 lives are should be worth more than the one. And this video is already really long. I cannot go into more detail on on the calculation how I would add up these things, because this is a really, really complicated topic. But just in general, I would say, yeah, if you just cop out by saying the value is infinite, so you can never infringe upon it, it's just a cop out.
By virtue of it being a right, there is nothing that can justify that kind of violation. Now, people who think this way do run into problems. For instance, the ticking time bomb case, right? If there's one person on planet Earth who knows the location of a bomb that's about to explode in Manhattan and kill thousands of people, and the only way to extract the information of where that bomb is from them is to torture them, if somebody thinks that that person has a right not to be tortured,
I don't think so. I mean, this is a tricky question, because if this person this person is actively endangering people, even if it's not the terrorists themselves, because he or she knows the position of the bomb and is not voluntarily giving it up, that would be his or her duty to protect our lives. And thus, in that case, his life, to me, on his right not to be tortured, weighs less than the lives of the other people, because basically he has this debt. He has not fulfilled his duty to keep up the rights of the other people. So he has a debt, and even if he set the value of his life or his freedom from harm to infinite, you still can say, but he has also an equal debt to it. It's not that easy, as I said, but generally this is the calculation I would make.
it means that there's no circumstance in which we can absolve ourselves of our duty not to torture them. And so by torturing them, we're doing something wrong.
And the question is also, if it's really only if you really only have the option of torturing, and if you're really 99.9999999% sure that this person knows. So this is also what you have to keep in mind. Basically, if there is a chance that you torture an innocent person, you have to look at it differently again.
What this means is that in the situation where the only way to find out the location of the bomb is by violating someone's rights, we can't violate that person's rights, and we need to allow the bomb to go.
I would say yes, we can, especially if they basically either the terrorists themselves are aware of the location of the bomb but not willing to say it.
For a utilitarian, this is an incredibly troubling prospect, right? It's like we're really going to allow thousands of people to die, not to mention all the property damage, just to kind of protect this one person's rights? Well, for the person who believes in rights and thinks they're genuinely inviolable, yes. And the way that someone who thinks this way would carry...
Yeah, so this is like inviolable. Inviolable, in a mathematical sense, is just placing an infinite value to it. And even with infinites, you can do calculations. So this is, as I said, this is a cop-out. This is you say, oh, I can't, this is inviolable. This is just a cop-out. You're not rational, in my opinion. Sorry, Alex.
Characterize the situation is they would simply say that the person whose job it is to extract the information is not responsible for the deaths of the thousands of people when the bomb finally goes off. Right? The person who is responsible for those deaths is the terrorist who planted the bomb.
No, because if you're in a position to help here, this goes back to the first question. If you're in a position to help, because you definitely know that is the terrorist, and you're basically with law enforcement, you have the authority to prevent that attack, and you definitely know that this person is the person who knows where the bomb is. Maybe they said they know where the bomb is, but I'm just not going to tell you. Then there is a moral obligation, like in question 1. So this goes back to the disagreement we had in the first question, I think.
Right, the person who refuses to torture the man with that information is not responsible for those deaths. He's only responsible for whether or not he tortures the man with the information. The blame, that is to say, for the bomb going off lies solely with the person who planted the bomb with malicious intent. The person who refuses to violate someone's rights to stop that bomb from going off isn't responsible for the bomb going off. Now, of course...
Yeah, as I said, this is my opinion, is not true. The person that is not violating the right of the terrorist is just copping out and is thus guilty.
Those thousands of people who will die in the bomb blast also have a right to life. And so you might ask, well, doesn't the person, by refusing to torture this one person, violate the rights of those people by allowing them to die?
Yeah.
Well, no. When the bomb goes off and thousands of people die, those thousands of people have had their rights violated. Their right to life has been violated. But who's it been violated by? It's been violated by the terrorist who planted the bomb. The person...
Yeah, but sorry, you were in a position to save their lives, and you actively choose to value the right to be unharmed of the terrorist, the right of terrorists not to be tortured. You actively made a decision to value the right of the terrorist higher than the rights to life of all the people that died in the bomb blast. And this is your moral obligation. You were in the position, you made this decision, and even the decision not to do something is a decision that you are responsible for. You cannot cop out of it. Sorry, Alex.
The person who refuses to torture the man with the information may have allowed those rights to be violated by the terrorists, but he does not himself violate those rights. He allows the situation to...
Didn't you yourself say that if you have a right to life, other people have the moral obligation to make sure that that right's not violated? And this is what I would say here. You have a duty to protect your fellow citizens. And if you do nothing, you're violating these rights. And you're basically actively making the calculation that the right to life of the terrorist or to not be tortured is more valuable than the right to life of all the innocent people.
To obtain in which somebody else violates their right by setting off that bomb. But by allowing that situation to obtain, he has not himself violated those rights. So although we may think that from a neutral perspective, so to speak, the situation in which the bomb goes off and thousands of people die is much worse than the situation in which a single person is tortured, we're interested here in moral obligation. And if rights exist and cannot be violated ethically in any circumstance, then the person who is...
Yeah, this is where we disagree. The right can be violated, especially if you yourself did something to infringe on others' rights and not fulfill your duties, that to me are what justifies your right.
Asked with getting the information from the man who knows where the bomb is. And the only way they can do that is by violating his right not to be tortured. They cannot torture that man. Now, okay, let me link this back to the question. What I'm trying to get across is that in such a situation where thousands of people are going to die if I don't torture this one individual, if we believe in rights and we believe that rights are inviolable, we would say that it's wrong for me to violate that person's rights, regardless of the circumstances. It doesn't matter if a bomb's about to go off, or a bomb's about to go off, or thousands of people are going to die, or one person's going to die, whatever. That's irrelevant, because rights mean that they cannot be violated. So it doesn't matter what the consequences.
Where does it say that? To me, that's not the definition of right. A right is a very high standard that is very tough to justify to violate. And even if you give it an infinite value, you still have calculations to do here. So I don't really know what's the logic behind this. Basically, if you have an uninfringible right, but don't use your duty to protect the rights of others, basically you're making the calculation. You're just saying you don't. This is a situation that you come in. It's not possible to not infringe on any person's right in such situations, and you're infringing upon their rights if you do something or if you do nothing. You really don't have a choice. You just have to make the calculation which rights you can violate in that situation and which you can't. And I would always say that basically if a person violates other people's rights, like the terrorist who's violating the right to life of many, many people, that person by definition is the first person that I would look at when I consider this dilemma, which right to violate, because basically they have a debt. They didn't fulfill their duty to keep the rights of the others, and that's a debt to their rights. So no matter what value, even if it's infinite, you place on their right, you always have to calculate against it the rights he infringes upon, and this diminish his right.
What matters is if I violate someone's rights in any circumstance, I've done something wrong. Now, presumably, it's worse for me to violate two people's rights than to violate one person's right. And this is where I think we can get some clarity on this question. Because if this rights-based perspective really does take no account of the consequence of violating or respecting people's rights, it just says that whatever the circumstance, you need to respect this person's rights because that's what a right is, then presumably the more people's rights are violated, the worse the situation. So in the question, we're asked about the difference between harming one person and thereby probably violating some kind of right that they have to help 10 people, and violating 10,000 people's rights to help 100,000 people. Now, in the second case, the number of people helped has increased. But on this rights-based perspective, we're not taking account of the consequence. We're just taking account of our obligation not to violate rights of innocent people. So what we essentially have is the difference between violating one person's right and violating.
As I said, the math here is not sound, my friend. If you do a calculation with values of rights, you have to do it for all of them equally. And since the percentage is the same calculation, that's really a non-starter, sorry.
10,000 people's rights. And clearly the situation in which we violate 10,000 people's rights is much worse. So if you're a utilitarian, I think that the calculation comes out the same, right? If you harm one person to save 10 people, or you harm 10,000 people to save 100,000 people, because the proportions are the same, the calculation comes out the same, right? The balance of pleasure and pain is the same, and so these situations are morally identical. But that's because the utilitarian takes into account the consequences. But if you believe in rights and the way that I've characterized them, that is,
as I said, you basically characterize the right with infinite value. And as I said, this is mathematically interesting and complicated, but you're just trying to say, I'm not doing this calculation, I'm not counting the outcomes, because if I just cop out of making the decision to help a person because the other person has caused harm, this is just, no, sorry, the math is not sound on this one.
That they are inviolable no matter the circumstances, then I do think it would be worse to harm 10,000 people to save 100,000 people than it would be to harm one person to save 10 people. Because all we really need to take into account, insofar as someone's moral obligations are concerned, is...
Yeah, that's the difference. You have a moral obligation, as you said yourself, to protect others' rights. And this is ways as hard as the right of the other person. So
if they violate someone's rights, and if so, how many rights do they violate? And in the smaller case, they only violate one person's right. In the larger case, they violate 10,000 people's rights. And we don't take the consequences into account. We just say that you've done something much worse by violating more people's rights than just by violating one person's rights. So if you believe in rights in this way, I think that there would be an ethical difference between these two circumstances. And
yeah, basically, as I said, the problem is here, you're only taking into account the rights violated and not the rights saved. No? Saving the right, protecting the right is also a moral obligation, in my framework at least.
Anyway, there are 19 questions on this particular quiz, and I've managed to answer 4 of them in an amount of time that I'm pretty sure has amounted to a pretty long video already. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you don't feel kind of cheated that I only answered 4 of the questions, because I think we delved into a great variety of moral concepts. But if you want to see me answer more of these questions, let me know if you enjoyed this video, and I can do some more.
I definitely enjoyed it. I hope for more questions. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you have any questions, other points, arguments, let me know in the comment. Be sure to give Alex's video a like and a watch. Until next time, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.